Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to India House, to this very special event to discuss the opportunities and challenges for India's quest to become a developed economy by 2047. It's my privilege to extend a very warm welcome to our Honorable Minister for Finance and Corporate Affairs, Srimati Nirmala Sitharaman, to the former Chairman of the Finance Commission of India and the former member of Rajya Sabha, Shri N.K. Singh. Huge welcome to Lord Nicholas Stern, the IG Patel Professor of Economics and Government and Chair of the Grantham Research Institute. Professor Larry Kramer, our neighbor, the President and the Vice Chancellor of the London School of Economics and Political Science. And before we begin this event, it's my pleasure to invite all of you and the High Commissioner of India, Mr. Vikram Doraiswamy, for a group photo so we can commemorate this very special morning. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, rest of course. Can I invite the Honorable Finance Minister, please, to take the stage? Lord Nicholas Stern and Mr. N.K. Singh. Thank you very much. Let's begin by first welcoming our High Commissioner, Sri Vikram Doraiswamy, who will now address us with his welcome remarks.
Thank you very much, Madam Minister, Professor Kramer, friends from LSE, Mr. N.K. Singh, Lord Stern, Lord Gadia, friends from my colleague, High Commissioner of, my counterpart colleague, I should say, the High Commissioner of the UK in New Delhi, Lindy Cameron. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us here today at this very special occasion in which we partner the London School of Economics in hosting our Finance Minister to talk to us about opportunities and challenges for India's quest to become a developed nation by 2047, our government's flagship agenda. This is our Finance Minister's first visit in her current capacity, but also her first visit in some, I was reminding her, 9 years nearly. So it is, I dare say, long overdue, and we are delighted to welcome you here, Madam Minister. We're also delighted that with you we have the Finance Secretary, Ajay Seth, our senior colleague in government, Mr. Rajaraman, who chairs the GIFT City, India's initiative to create our own financial center currently in Gujarat, first of its kind, an opportunity to coordinate and open up markets and investment in a new framework for India. GIFT City has been one of our signature offerings in recent times. The chairman was here just fortnight ago in offering GIFT City as an opening for universities and businesses from the UK to look at India. In this conversation, we will have the opportunity to have Professor Kramer welcome us and also talk a bit about his recent visit to India and the work that the LSE does with India through the India Observatory, which has been in place now for a decade, and in the extraordinary relationship that we have had with the LSE, no less and most significantly in the fact that Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, the founding framer of the Indian Constitution, did his PhD there, and it is indeed his birth anniversary this coming Monday. So we couldn't have a more opportune time for this event to celebrate the partnership between India and the UK with our Finance Minister in town in the context of our partnership with the LSE. So without further ado, may I invite Mr. Professor, hopefully Lord too soon, Larry Kramer, to address us. Thank you.
thank you, High Commissioner, and welcome, Finance Minister, and everybody who was here. It's really an honor and a privilege to have the chance to speak to you at all and to be here for this event. As mentioned, I actually just recently got back from India. It was my first trip there in my role at LSE, and it was a really remarkable trip in many different ways. What struck me overwhelmingly, which I talked about a lot, I did a bunch of interviews while I was there, and what was overwhelming was the kind of energy and optimism and pace of change that you could see. I had last been in India before COVID, so it had been a few years, and the amount of change that had taken place for the positive was incredibly striking. And as I say, everybody I met, there was a kind of energy and enthusiasm that, quite frankly, you do not hear in my former home country, and I won't say anything about my current one. No, I didn't mean that negatively. I did not. But there's lessons to be learned from what's happening in India, I think, for all of us. Particularly given what's happening in the world now, one of the things that we talked about quite a bit with all of the people we met there was the opportunity the nation has to really assert a role in world leadership and to fill a gap that has obviously emerged right now. And for me, speaking on behalf of LSE, that was a particularly important thing to hear because we believe LSE actually has a role to play in this. As mentioned, we are a global school. We have long connections to India. They actually stretch back to the very founding of the school. I think the first PhD was someone from India. The first department was funded by a gift from the Tata Trust. It is currently our social policy department. And all through the years, a great many students, including Ambedkar, have come through the school. It is still today one of our largest cohorts of students. More importantly, it's one of our best cohorts of students. The students are very active, they're engaged, they mix with the students from around, they take away, I think, the best of LSE and they bring some of the best of India to us. It is a cohort we are eager to grow and expand, both in terms of getting students and on the research front. We think there are a great many opportunities for research partnerships. In addition to the observatory, while I was in India, we announced the launch of the LSE Research and Education Foundation, which we have now set up in the country to be a platform from which we will be able to do a great many more things. So the trip really left me incredibly hopeful, both about India, about LSE's role in its continued growth, and about its place in the world. I was privileged while I was there to actually meet with the finance minister, who explained to me some of India's priorities, which, as I say, line up really well with what I believe are our school's strengths. And it was an honor to meet with you there. And I will say we're just really pleased that on a busy trip where we know you have a lot of things to do, you have chosen to take some time out to do this event with us, to talk with NK and Nick, and to give everybody a chance to hear from you. So thank you so much, and it's wonderful to be here.
Thank you very much, Professor Kramer. May I now respectfully invite the Honourable Minister for Finance and Corporate Affairs to deliver her address. Madam.
Good morning. What an honor and privilege it is for me to be here and to address this August gathering. Professor Larry Kramer, Vice Chancellor of LSE, Lord Stern, and Shri N.K. Singh, High Commissioner Vikram Doraiswamy, and also High Commissioner in India from the UK, dignitaries and students. It's a great privilege indeed, and a pleasure to be in London School of Economics, although we are hosting it in India House today, which has produced generations of world-class scholarship and erudition. Let me express my gratitude for this opportunity to speak on India's development prospects on this platform. Today, India stands at a defining moment in its economic trajectory. Over the past decade, we have surged ahead, climbing from being the 10th largest economy to the 5th largest in just 5 years. This transformation is a testament to our prudent macroeconomic policies, steadfast reforms, and the resilience of our people. As we aspire to become a Vikasit Bharat by 2047, that is, a developed nation by the centenary of our independence. The path ahead demands innovation, sustained investment, continued reforms, and a firm commitment to inclusive growth. Our growth trajectory remains strong, underpinned by sound macroeconomic fundamentals and structural reforms implemented over the last decade. However, we recognize that the global landscape is changing today, and rapidly at that. The globalization era, which saw the developing economies capitalize on their low-cost advantages to drive growth, has given way to localization. Today, the realignment of supply chains, evolving trade dynamics, and geopolitical fragmentation collectively reinforce the importance of economic security and self-reliance. Recognizing the shifts underway, the Indian government's budgets, and particularly the budget of 25-26, has outlined a clear roadmap focusing on key priorities, including agricultural productivity, rural development, inclusive growth, manufacturing, MSME support, employment generation, innovation, energy security, and export promotion. This set of priorities builds upon the foundation laid in previous years, ensuring that India remains resilient in the face of external challenges while leveraging domestic economic strength. India's greatest strength lies in its vast and diverse pool of human capital. With 26% of our population in 10 to 24 age group and a median age at just 28 years, we have the potential to fuel unprecedented economic growth. While the demographic profile is highly favorable, the challenge lies in addressing the skilling and employment needs of such a large population to make them future ready. This challenge assumes greater dimensions in the face of rapidly changing technological demands, particularly on our workforce, particularly again with the increasing penetration of artificial intelligence. The hardening of attitudes to immigration and demands for wage parity with domestic labor impart an additional dimension to India's employment imprint. The government is doing its best to address this challenge. Initiatives such as the Skill India, Startup India, and the National Education Policy 2020, that is, form the foundation for nurturing a skilled and innovative workforce. India's AI mission has generated global optimism, and India's presence on the World AI platform has become significant. The expansion of Atal Tinkering Labs in schools will nurture a spirit of innovation among students, while the National Centers of Excellence for Skilling, announced in the Union Budget, will provide industry-relevant training to the youth. Other initiatives like internships for 1 crore youth over 5 years, employment linked to incentive schemes, and wage support for freshers, among others, reflect our commitment to securing gainful employment for the people of India. Labor reforms, measures to enhance the ease of doing business, infrastructure development are creating an environment conducive to entrepreneurship and job creation. The realization of the ambition for Vikasit Bharat 2047 remains closely linked to global economic developments, as you would understand. Over the last 2.5 decades, globalization has presented India with unprecedented opportunities. in trade, in investment, and also in technical advancement. As a trusted investment destination, India has attracted cumulative gross FDI, that is the foreign direct investment inflows, exceeding $1 trillion since 2000. Investor-friendly policies, a vibrant innovation ecosystem, and improving global competitiveness continue to attract capital and technology into our country. Given its global interconnectedness, the Indian economy is not isolated from the global risks and challenges arising due to geopolitical tensions, trade disruptions, and financial market volatility. The IMF reports a threefold increase in new trade restrictions since 2019, and the UNCTAD World's Investment Report 2024 highlights a 2% decline in global FDI in 2023. Navigating these headwinds requires strategic policy interventions with a strong emphasis on strengthening domestic capabilities and capacities. In this phase of a rapidly evolving global policy landscape, with a number of imponderables, the government's conviction is that the most effective path to building economic resilience is to foster domestic efficiencies and competitiveness. The last two union budgets have laid out a multi-sectoral policy as an agenda to drive sustained growth. Key development measures focus on enhancing agricultural productivity, strengthening manufacturing capabilities, and providing robust support for small and medium enterprises. And these measures are capable of driving investment, productivity, and economic growth. Infrastructure development has been a cornerstone of our policy agenda over the past decade. The Union government's capital expenditure has been raised by 4.3 times from 2017-18 to 2025-26 budget. This significant increase has led to a qualitative transformation in India's physical infrastructure. Since 2014, the national highway network has expanded by about 65%. The number of operational airports has more than doubled, and maritime and rail connectivity has vastly improved. The Prime Minister's Gati Shakti National Master Plan is strengthening multimodal connectivity, streamlining trade, and reducing logistics cost. As a result, India's ranking in the World Bank's Logistics Performance Index has risen from 54 in 2014 to 38 in 2023. We earnestly hope that private investment, both in partnership with the public sector and on its own, picks pace gradually. Alongside physical infrastructure, the development of public digital infrastructure has been transformative. Over the last decade, the initiatives such as UPI, Aadhaar, and the JAM Trinity have revolutionized financial inclusion, formalized the economy, and enhanced efficiency across sectors. The digital revolution also presents challenges such as cybersecurity threats, digital literacy gaps, and unequal access to technology. The government is addressing these concerns through initiatives like Digital Saksharata Abhiyan for digital literacy and data protection laws for privacy and security, and the latest announcement, that is BharatNet for rural connectivity. Continued investments and inclusive policies will enable India to leverage digital infrastructure for sustained economic development. Climate change is one of the defining challenges of our time. Our pledge is to achieve net zero emissions by 2070, underscores our resolve to balance economic growth with environmental sustainability. However, the path to a green transition demands significant investments, policy innovation, and international cooperation. Our ambitious renewable energy goals depend on overcoming hurdles like energy storage costs, grid stability, and dependencies on critical minerals. We can overcome these obstacles by encouraging innovation in battery technology and supporting domestic manufacturing of renewable energy components. The government is actively promoting green finance, sustainable urban development, and climate resilient infrastructure. The train of climate change may have left the station already, and hence adapting to its effects, such as heat waves and flooding, commands a higher priority. Further, resources have trade-offs as well, and the industrial revolution and the successful development of today's advanced nations were based on abundant, cheap energy. Therefore, our approach to energy diversification and reducing fossil fuel dependence has to be pragmatic, recognizing their fiscal growth and security implications. As India embarks on transformative reforms to achieve Viksit Bharat, strengthening governance structures and state capacity is non-negotiable. One of the most notable advancements has been the digitization of public services. With initiatives like the direct benefit transfer, streamlining subsidies, reducing leakages, and ensuring targeted welfare delivery. The e-delivery of government services has also expanded across sectors, particularly finance, local government utilities, and social welfare schemes. To build a future and a future-ready bureaucracy, programs like Mission Karma Yogi are equipping civil servants with data-driven decision-making skills and encouraging interdepartmental collaboration. Going forward, partnerships with civil society, industry, and academia are crucial to ensuring policies remain citizen-centric and innovative. In conclusion, the road ahead is what I would like to spend the next few minutes on. As we march towards Viksit Bharat 2047, our approach must be inclusive, sustainable, and innovation-driven, transforming challenges into opportunities for growth. The coming decades will be shaped by our ability to harness human capital, build world-class infrastructure, navigate global uncertainties, and adopt cutting-edge technologies. Our government remains committed to continued reforms, maintaining macroeconomic stability, and ensuring that growth benefits are well in every section of the society. Viksit Bharat is not just a policy goal, it is a national mission. With determination and collective effort, we will transform India into a global powerhouse and a beacon of prosperity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister, for that illuminating address on the opportunities and the challenges towards becoming Viksit Bharat by 2047. You've given us much to reflect on as we navigate the critical way forward. And building on that perspective, it's now my pleasure and privilege to invite Lord Nicholas Stern to share his reflections and remarks on this topic. The floor is yours, sir.
Should I stay here? Okay. Thank you, Finance Minister, for being with us today. It's an enormous honor. I know you've got so much to do with other finance ministries, with industry, and it's really very good of you to spend some time reflecting with a bunch of academics on the future of India. I think it was thoughtful, strategic, and inspiring, the plans that you laid out. and your description of the foundations that have been built. As you know, I've been coming to India now for more than 50 years, at least once or twice a year throughout that time, and living there for a couple of quite long periods. I like to think of it as another home. And the change in that time has been quite remarkable. And I've seen it through the eyes of one particular village in UP, but also from the point of view of the economy as a whole. And the basic entrepreneurship of the Indian people is quite remarkable. From in the village of Palanpur, people who changed from just farming to farming and maintaining motorcycles and tractors, people who bought an oil crusher which serves much of the village and other villages, people who buy solar panels and charge up other people's mobile phones. That's entrepreneurship. That's entrepreneurship at the village level. And of course, just to take two houses that the LSE has good relationships with, Tata and Reliance, you've seen entrepreneurship on a huge world stage. So that entrepreneurship runs right through the Indian economy and will be, as you emphasize so clearly, an enormous driving force in the road to being a developed country by 1947. And surely the basic elements of the climate for investment, the infrastructure, and the skills of the people form, as you described, again so clearly, the basis of a clear strategy. And the dynamism of these last 10 years or so, and you've contributed so much to shaping it, surely gives us all optimism. And growth now has to be sustainable from the point of view of the environment. There's no choice. And again, India is very much engaged with that kind of issue. It involves investment, but it involves investment which is very closely integrated with infrastructure investment itself. India will multiply probably by mid-century its electricity capacity by 4 or 5 times as transportation moves to electricity, as heating and cooling move to electricity, and that electricity has to be green. And that's a key example of how the sustainable development story and the development story itself are inextricably intertwined. They're not separate. There's just one story. And again, as you emphasized, inclusion is of fundamental importance. And that comes in many ways, of course, the skills and education of the people and the great advantages brought about by digitization and the ability of people to realize opportunities in ways they couldn't before. So I think your story is absolutely inspiring and gives confidence to all of India's friends, as well as I'm sure India itself. Let me turn now to my questions, because I'm moderating the questions and you'll be asking questions very shortly after NK asks questions. But here's 2 questions, which are about India's role and interactions with the world in the context of the strong India that you describe so clearly as being built and will be taken forward. The first is trade. And we've seen in these last couple of months, indeed in the last few days, how world trade will be disrupted. I'm not saying we're seeing where it's going. It's a bit early for that. We're surely seeing that it's being disruptive. And often moments of disruption are moments of opportunity. And it's the strong and the imaginative that can take those opportunities. And one thing I think is reasonably clear around trade is that there'll be less trade with the United States. That seems to be their choice. And more trade in Asia, and I hope in relations within Asia, because Asia is the most dynamic force in world growth in the coming years. But also, I hope, as a European, trade between Asia and Europe. Of course, UK, as we all know, is still very much part of Europe. So that story of how, in the process of enhancing its growth, building its economy, strengthening its growth, how India will see the redesign and the rebuilding of trade relationships, particularly in the context of most dynamic part of the world, which is Asia, but also I hope with Europe. The second is very much related to my dear friend NK. You kindly asked NK and Larry Summers to, during the very successful Indian presidency of the G20 in 2023, to lead work on the reform of the multilateral development banks. And I was privileged to be part of that group working with NK and Larry Summers. And you laid out a chart for the advancement of those multilateral development banks in terms of what we called bigger, bolder, better. Bigger in the sense of very big expansion in the finance for the kinds of investments we've just been discussing. Bolder in terms of their relationship with the private sector and ability to share risk and reduce the cost of capital. And better in the sense of being much easier to work with, being faster, more cooperative, and working better as a group. Those were landmark reports which you commissioned and led. And I'd be very interested to hear about your thoughts on the future of that in the context of the new world economy, where perhaps the World Bank might be able to move only a little slowly because of their proximity to the White House. But other multilateral development banks, AIIB and the New Development Bank and the Asia Development Bank and so on, might be able to move more quickly. So those are my two questions. And perhaps, NK, would you like to ask your questions, or would you like to, or should we ask the finance minister? Would you like to take my questions, or just take NK's and then put them together?
As you wish. Or should I answer this and then you'll come up? All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nick, for questions which I think can be asked of anybody in this audience, not just a finance minister of a country. Surely, in the last few years, in fact, I would say a decade, we are seeing multilateral institutions weakening, particularly when you say institutions like WTO or institutions like the World Bank, unable to carry on with their core business with the same effectiveness as when they were conceived. You can carefully say that they are weakening. So I'm not concluding that they are weakening because of any other reason, but their effectiveness was clearly being whittled away in the last decade. As a result, during G20, when India's presidency was on, it was thought appropriate that the most decisive matter on which, or most critical matter on which we could deliberate in the G20 as a forum was on how to make the multilateral institutions a lot better. Also because India's presidency of the G20 came after the COVID and after the Russia-Ukraine war started. So we were in a position to talk about it from a lot more that we've learned during the 2020 crisis. And similarly, after the Ukraine war started. When I say 2020, the debt-ridden small countries and the resolution framework within which the IMF or the World Bank could come in to assist them were there in place, but actually on the ground, they were not getting realized. Many countries were still waiting for that kind of a support to come from these multilateral institutions. So as a result, you had a committee, high-level committee during COVID Indonesia presidency, and also subsequently the matter still had a lot of things to be resolved. The Indonesian presidency, through the high-level committee, discussed about how, let us say, the World Health Organization would be better funded, better endowed, better in a position to handle any future pandemic. God forbid, but any future pandemic. So if that focused on health, the G20 India presidency clearly looked at how the institutions have not been able to live up to the 21st century expectations, given the fact that we were looking at unforeseen events taking place, and they were not able to really catch up with the events of the day or the year and meet up with the expectations. So it was decided that we should have this high-level expert committee who look into this and come back. The report was extraordinary in its depth and dimensions. And when it was tabled in the G20, it received a real welcome, which the member nations saw that there was merit in discussing it and they wanted to carry it forward. I'm glad that Brazil is taking it up. But the point remains that multilateral institutions are unable to leverage the money that they have with them, nor are they coming up with innovative, newer ways of raising funds, which can bring in philanthropists or private capital, so that large public issues, which run for want of money into failure, can be addressed, climate being one of them, many other, digitizing the world, because that brings in efficiency, that brings in transparency, that brings in accountability for public funds. Many such things had to be taken up. So that's where I think the team of global experts really did a fantastic job. That would set the agenda for the next 10 years, I would think, for the multilateral institutions, inclusive of World Bank. But you spoke about trade, you spoke about countries like India, you spoke about Asia. I think the world is seeing depressed growth for over now several years. Earlier, it was low interest for long. Now it's going to be low growth for long. And that's not happy news for anybody. But yet, who are the ones who are growing? These are the emerging market economies, which are showing signs of very good sustained growth. India, for instance, has maintained that fastest growing economies tag continuously now for 4-5 years. And we still think that momentum may moderate a bit, but it will still be India who will keep that growth. And that's not because of any special circumstances, but even worse, I would want to highlight the fact that exports from India have still a lot more to do for themselves and improve, because exports, for instance, the net exports still contribute less than 1% of India's GDP. So it is necessary for us to improve on exports. But the fact that a large middle class with purchasing power in its hand, a large middle class and youth pool which has skilled manpower, are the ones which are boosting consumption domestically. And as a result, our growth gets really calibrated because of that consumption which exists domestically, but it is a demand which exists for global standard goods. And that is why globalization since 1990s has given India an opportunity to seek goods from different parts of the country, parts of the world. India and US trade is one of the biggest. US is the leading trade partner for India. So at that time, when trade is going to be influenced by tariff, the measures which the US government is taking, we still will have to make sure that the strength that India has, in that the demand and the domestic consumption is a big magnet which can attract global supplies. We need to keep that sustained and boosted, if anything. And that itself is a point of attraction for FDIs to come into India, invest in India, manufacture in India, supply for the domestic market, and also export from there, because manpower is available, market is available. So we think India and few emerging markets are going to be the engines of growth. The global depressed growth, if it has to pick up, will have to be because of these engines.
Well, I think that I will follow Nick's example by first making one or two observations, if I might. The first observation really is that I'm sure all of you are aware that in post-independence India, Nirmala ji is India's longest serving finance minister. This is her 8th year as the finance minister of when we began this kind of an exercise. So looking ahead, my 2 comments and then there are 2 questions. My 2 comments are that what is it that prompted you, finance minister, and this is not a question, this is really a comment, that all of us will wonder that there must be some degree of sagacity in prompting the finance minister to use the challenge as an opportunity. It was in the height of the pandemic that she announced the most far-reaching economic reforms after 1991 in some ways. And some of the areas like the issue of what to deal with the public sector undertaking and so on, which was considered untouchable, were all announced during the height of the pandemic, even as India was showing its way on how to creatively and imaginatively address the issue of the pandemic. And the second really observation, I would say, that nobody had any idea, finance minister, that what looked like uncertainty would be further deepened by contemporary events over the last few months of deep distrust, of uncertainty, of unpredictability. In a time like this, you do require fiscal space and the ability of the economy to absorb shocks. And there must be something which prompted the system and you to adhere to the path of deep fiscal consolidation and macroeconomic management with symmetry between economic policies, meaning thereby monetary and fiscal policies, continued with far-reaching ongoing structural reforms. And that places us in a better context to perhaps address these uncertainties and challenges which we seem to confront every day. So my first comment really, as an observation, was the somewhat sagacious move in no way anticipating, but creating a degree of fiscal room to deal with uncertainty as they arise. Now my questions. My questions are, I would say, let's say I'd like to ask you 2 questions. Since Larry will soon leave us, I believe, and taking advantage of his presence also, it is in his presence, therefore, I'm asking this question. One of the factors with which India could deeply benefit in terms of investor perception was a far greater and deeper reforms of the India's legal architecture and framework. Legal reforms in India have occupied, unfortunately, in spite of the concerted effort of one of your very distinguished predecessor, it occupied a backseat. And when we investor perception look at it, sure, India has a very fair legal system, except that we don't know whether it's our grandchildren who really gain the benefit of that, or it would be now looking at the congestion of the whole legal architecture. And this, I think that I would really seek your comments. The other on which far-reaching reforms is that India has been somewhat lucky in having continued stable and mature political leadership. To derive the greatest advantage of this leadership is that we must absolve the leadership of its continued preoccupation with ongoing electoral cycles. Every year, India faces an election. And being a functioning federal entity, how does one really ameliorate the onslaught, the economic costs, the political consequences, and the investor uncertainty of the ongoing cycle of a continued electoral cycle in a working federation. Last, and I'll stretch your generosity. Nick alluded to the fact that you have addressed the issue of the revised and altered role of the multilateral development banks, but on a broader scale, since clearly bipolar institutions and the bipolar world is behind us, and we have to live with an increasingly fragmented multipolar world. What do you say is the kind of creative role in a multipolar world which a country representing perhaps the voice of the South, India, could play in these kinds of uncertainties?
Thank you, NK. The decades of experience being part of Indian bureaucracy speaks. You can see questions which are certainly been a legacy issue are the ones which, issues which have been a legacy issue are the ones which are being posed by NK as a question. The stagnation in Indian courts is certainly a worrisome matter. Everybody talks about it, judiciary speaks about it. So I'm glad that they are seized of the matter, whether it is the lower judiciary or the higher and the appellate courts. They are all sitting with huge pendencies. And we've heard the Chief Justice of India speak about it and with a voice of concern. So I'm sure the judicial system is looking at ways in which they can expedite many of these and clear them. And of late, there's a great sense of urgency with which most of the senior judges speak about it. I'm sure they are evolving a way in which they can clear it. And the government will always be supportive of any step that the judiciary wants to take in clearing up the backlog. The issue of a multipolar world was evolving, I think, over the decades. There were no more bipolar, and at one point in time, people feared, was it going to be unipolar? But no, now it's multipolar very clearly, and multipolar is driving countries, also with the ineffectiveness, as I said, of multilateral institutions. It's driving many countries to clearly be active on the bilateral arrangements. And when bilateral arrangements are being made, you find that ideological or bloc-related affiliations no longer hold good. Countries are at their free will to tie up with either the neighbors or friends or countries with common interests or complementarity. They could belong to one group or the other. As a group, you wouldn't have had any relationship with them, but today when they come and stand out as a country, you're able to strike some bilateral arrangement. So bilateral arrangements for trade or for any other reason are catching up. And also because when bilateral earlier was viewed as strategic, today economy is the strategy. The strategic compulsions arise out of your economic strength or, let us say, not much of a strength, of weakness. So there is no hesitation to put economy over your strategic interests or to put economy into your strategic interest basket. And as a result, you find there is a rapidity with which countries are talking to each other and seeing if they can come up with some kind of an arrangement. India is also looking at many bilateral arrangements. In the recent past, we've signed agreements with Australia, with UAE, with Oman, and we are looking forward to concluding the bilateral trade agreement with UK, negotiating also with the EU. And this is going to catch up, and I think that's the way the world is going. Multilateral is at the moment in the back burner. Till such a time multilateral institutions revive and come to speak with a certain voice, bilateral is going to be the route. And that'll mean that the globe is going to be woven in so many different strands, so many different colors, and so many different ways in which the weaving can happen. So it's a very challenging and interesting phase ahead of us. But countries, as I said, are now localized. They're looking at their own strength as regards any other factor. The global uncertainties, the imponderables, are multiplying by the day. It is not possible for any one country to grapple with all of them, factor them in, and then make a policy. It's far easier, far simpler, and probably far more effective when you look at it through the bilateral lens. So that's, I suppose, I've answered. Yes. In fact, it was N.K. Singh, along with a former president of India, post his term as president of India, heading a committee with N.K. Singh as a member and many others also, who went into the details of what it costs to hold elections in India as frequently as we're holding, and submitted a report. I'm sure most of you are familiar with Indian electoral systems. The government of India is formed with the election to the Lok Sabha, which is the lower house, the people's house, which happens once in 5 years. And every province has its own elected government. They're called state assemblies. An election to those state assemblies also happen every 5 years. And this system was well in place till about late 60s, early 70s, when the elections for the government of India and to the state assemblies happened at the same time. So you do it once and you've got the results, you moved next 5 years without disruption. But today, or since after 1970s, because many state governments were out of turn, dropped, or governments were removed because the union government has the authority to remove governments in extraordinary circumstances. But those extraordinary circumstances went there when, because of political consideration, many state governments were thrown out. And as a result, their elections had to be held. I was just saying before coming into this room, in a matter of 10 years, where you would have imagined 2 elections would have happened, one to start, 5 years to run, another election, another 5 years to run, you've had more than 4 elections within that 10-year period. The cost that the government of India bears, or the electoral office bears, the commission bears, and also the expenses on account of deploying paramilitary forces to take care of security, and the people, and the voting day is a holiday in India. So people and their functioning literally comes to a standstill. Even worse, everything comes to a standstill, but even worse, election commission, because it wants to have ideal ecosystem before election happens, almost for 90 days comes up with a code of conduct wherein no new projects can be launched. A very well-built road cannot be opened up for public use. A dam which is constructed for storing water will have to wait for its inauguration. And everything else, even a hospital which is constructed, doctors are deployed, cannot be opened up for those 90 days. And as soon as the 90 days would get over, you would want to open it up. Then you realize a particular local body which had its municipal election, which didn't get concluded, will have to be there on their elections, and therefore another 90 days would go away. So on, people themselves realize this is getting frustrating. In fact, one data which NK brought out was that if the costs are cut down, the quantum is all calculated, 12,000 crores could be saved if you had the elections together with the central government and the state assemblies are elected. Otherwise, you're wasting 12,000 crores. But if this was conducted in that way, one election for both the central government and for state governments, it helps the GDP grow by 1.5%, which means about 4 trillions get added to your GDP. And it is that kind of a wastage that we're seeing when elections are held at different times. People are constantly, they were vicarious and cynical explanations being given by people saying every time an election happens, the poster makers, the banner makers, those who are running those auto rickshaws for campaign material and so on benefit because it improves their small people's businesses. That's how, frustrated we can be that we justify it based on these sort of things rather than look at the larger goal which have to be achieved. So one nation, one election is a campaign which has started, not to instantly implement it, but to implement it post 2029 Lok Sabha elections. And the alignment of all the elected state assemblies will be done by 2034. Clearly, because nation and its interests is being put forward, this has been something which is given a lot of time for people to understand, settle down, and legally make a framework for it. 10 years, imagine. And in spite of that, people are not wanting to move the first step forward. Just obstruct just because you think this will not benefit one, or it might benefit somebody else, but not me, and so on. So it stands to do benefit to the country, and all of us must probably understand it better and ideally campaign for holding one nation, one election.
Thank you so much, Finance Minister. We now have about 15 minutes left for your questions, and I'm going to take 3 at a time, and we have at least 6 hands raised, so 7, 8. We're going to, let's try to get 2 blocks of 3 at least. If I could go to the far back there on this side, please. And could you give your name, please?
Amrita Saha, Institute of Development Studies. Thank you, Minister, for your very comprehensive remarks. You mentioned that, multilateralism has been weakening, and you also alluded to bilateral trade agreements. I was just wondering, from an economic diplomacy perspective, how do you see sort of India possibly strategically positioning itself in terms of sort of a future for economic diplomacy for global trade? I'll keep it short. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and a good example of a short question. Just here, please.
Thanks very much. Kriyan Butler from Chatham House. So my question actually follows very much along those lines. In the context of the US seemingly pulling out of the global trading system, the question is India's relationship with China, particularly in the area of green technology. China has extraordinary technologies. You can see how much of a momentum there is there. I just wonder how you see India's relationship with that part of the world economy growing in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Kriyan. And just the lady to, could you pass the lady to your right and slightly forward? Thank you.
Thank you. Eleni Correa from The Guardian. Just to follow up on something that you said, Minister, I want to ask, does Donald Trump's decision to impose tariffs create a further urgency in the India-UK trade talks and a desire to strike a deal sooner?
Thank you, and thank you for your brevity in the questions. Greatly appreciated. Please.
Well, India's negotiations with the UK on the FTA, I'm coming from here, I'll move that way, has been on for a very long time, in fact. After a break because of Brexit, we resumed the discussions from 2022. And I was happy to have the trade minister, Nicholson, who came recently to India, Reynolds, who had come to India, and he had a very productive meeting. So if you've resumed from February 2022, and the negotiations have been going on, and in fact, I remember during G20, during India's presidency, when the then Chancellor of the Exchequer had come, Jeremy Hunt, and we spent quite some time discussing. So it is not as if we are rushing into a UK FTA because something has developed from the US. This was to happen a long time ago. It got delayed. I'm sure now we hope, also with the new government showing great deal of commitment and enthusiasm to have this agreement signed, we will be in a position to sign it sooner rather than later. There was this question on China and the green technologies. India's had a very big trade partnership with China. In fact, in India, it would be a question saying, you're importing a lot and thereby the payments are not in your favor. Balance of payments are not in your favor. But equally, we've also been consciously seeking market access for very many goods in which China was interested and also had gone to the extent of coming, inspecting, setting up these SPS, phytosanitary centers, the clinics, and so on. And so with the pharmaceutical products, generic drugs, which India wanted to export. So these negotiations have been going on with China. So if that is one side of the story, the other is on the green technologies that you specifically referred to. India's solar capacities initially started off with a lot of imports coming from China. But today, because of the way in which we have designed our PLI programs, productivity linked incentive programs, production of voltaic cells, and also many of the solar panels, the films are happening in India itself. Similarly, the API, the active pharmaceutical ingredients, are also getting PLI support, and we are producing them because the dependence was growing and becoming larger as well. However, we still think we need to have trade with China, but question of bringing a balance there. So we will negotiate and see what we want to find as a win-win for both the countries in terms of trade. On green technologies, India is investing a lot, whether it is the green hydrogen mission, or whether you're looking at the advanced chemistry for which the PLI has been working out. We've also had, luckily, some critical minerals being excavated in India itself. We are able to have lithium and look at the announcement that we came up with in this budget about small modular nuclear reactors that we want to build. I think that will have a great possibility to be laid across the country, because when it is small and modular, it is possible to set up in different places as well. So we are very clearly showing signs of moving from fossil fuel to solar and wind, but even further to nuclear reactors as well. Did I miss out on that lady's question? Haven't I answered that in a way?
I think you covered it. It was really about the economic diplomacy in the changing world. So, a gentleman just here, please, the microphone.
I'm Lund Roy. I'm from two research centers at LSE and LCP. I'm a macro growth theorist. And first of all, I want to congratulate you for excellent, robust, and resilient leadership of India's economy. Second, I'm going to say at G20 and 4 weeks ago in Tokyo, also on a blog this weekend, I raised the question of why emerging markets growth is low. And emerging markets growth is the largest component of global growth. And the answers, which come a little bit from what Abe-san and policy advisors and economists recommend, have to do with human capital that you touched on. The number one is gender equality, and that's what I said in Japan's not been improving, and Brazil also has not been improving in the G20. And the second is youth engagement. Would you like to kind of share some thing about India's progress on that to achieving not just GDP growth, but also GDP per capita growth? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Gentleman just behind you, if you could pass.
Thank
Thank you, Honorable Minister, for a very insightful speech and remarks. Siddharth Khasi from WMG University of Warwick. We've talked a lot about the macroeconomics today, and I was wondering, when it comes to technological innovation, we need to choose technologies. We need to, and every innovation requires investment. So we've got some mega trends in India, like electric vehicles, AI, renewable sources you mentioned. And at a finance ministry level, and in your position, you'll need to make some trade-offs and pick winners, if I may say so. And I was wondering if you could provide some insights into how that decision-making process happens when you have to choose technologies and innovations for the investment perspective. Thank you.
Thank you. Just one more from this side, the lady at the front here.
Minister, thank you for your enlightening words. You mentioned the resilience.
Could you give us your name, please?
Aditi from PTI, Press Trust of India. You mentioned the resilience of the Indian economy. There's a lot of worries. There's a lot of turmoil in the recent stock market turmoil. Are there aspects that worry you for the economy at the moment? And where do allies like the UK come in, where your EFT is taking place tomorrow? What are the focus areas that you feel are more important today? Thank you.
Well, of course, the free trade agreements are things on which we've been working, as I said earlier. The strengths that UK has in the financial sector, the City of London has the biggest potential for financial world, and post-Brexit, they've maintained themselves as the leaders in this area. We'll certainly be looking at it. Also looking at education, because the new education policy which has come up in 2020, and also the IFSCA, which is the GIFT City, which is a financial services center that we have, international financial service, which we have in Gujarat, are all places where education is being given a priority. Universities can be welcomed. They can come and set up universities in India. And even as it is talking in the LSE forum, I'm able to say that there was a time when the first choice for Indian higher education seekers was UK. But gradually it came down. There was a time it came down but picked up a bit more. But after COVID, you see Indian students' first priority is the United States rather than UK. LSE itself, even as in 1912, if I understand right, had an Indian student heading its students' union. That's been the interest with which Indian students have chosen to come to UK for higher education, but that momentum will have to be regained. So that will be another area in which we will be talking. Also talking from the point of view of exchange of mutual recognition, let's say, of certain professions, which is important for both the countries, and science and technology, where even now UK holds some primary positions, premier quality research, areas in which India would like to seek cooperation and collaboration. So we'll be looking at all these during our talks as the FTA progresses. We'll also be looking at finishing off, meaning successfully concluding the investment treaty, which has also been running parallel to the FTA negotiations. Hopefully we'll conclude both of them.
The labor and gender opportunities. Output growth.
We've given a lot of priority for skilling our youth. And that has found a place in every budget that we've announced. The previous one, which was July 2024, which was post the election for the rest of the year budget, it's not one full complete budget, but even there, we gave priority for skilling youth, creating centers of excellence for artificial intelligence, setting them up in premier institutions like the IITs, focusing them for agriculture, health, and education, and also making sure at the state level, the ITIs of let's say, once upon a time, old institutions with which have been suffering for want of attention, will get a lot of money investment from the center, so that they will be equipped to have everything that is required for training youth in artificial intelligence. You need the kind of instruments with which you can have hands-on training. So Government of India has announced that in the states, we will invest money so that these training centers will become up to today's requirements. Other than this, we have also very clearly announced in the budget that in the top 500 companies of the country, youth will be given a 1-year internship opportunity. And we gave a number targeting 1 crore youth in the next 5 years will be given in a very transparent fashion. Whoever chooses to go wherever will be given an opportunity where the central government pays their internship costs, with the companies putting a small amount, 4,500 from us and 500 from the companies. They will get into various different top 500 companies to know what kind of things are required for them to be eligible to be employed by such companies. What's the scope and expanse with which these companies are building their manufacturing capacities, so that they get an idea of what is it that they're missing. So go back and get yourself trained and then go into these jobs. Other than that, we have also incentivized companies, the small ones, particularly small and medium, what is called as family businesses. We've allowed them to recruit new young people for whom we will pay their provident fund and the monthly payments that they go towards a fund which will take care of them in future, so that the companies are not burdened by taking the additional help. So that's going on all over the country. You had a question on technological priorities. Sorry? Particularly for a country like India, it is where the resources are limited. Even if you want to be generous with the resources, the demands on the resources are a lot more than what you would otherwise imagine. The way in which we arrive at one and not the other is not so much on the merit of those, because they are all equally, suppose you assume they are all equally important in terms of the priority and also the quality of the proposal itself. We look at it more from the point of view, what impact it will have on creating employment. How much of jobs will be created because of that becoming commercial scale? And how much can actually that particular technology or that particular proposal can translate to scaling up? So the priorities are more human-centric rather than cost-centric. If it has an impact immediately, yes, we are there with it.
Thank you very much, Finance Minister. We've come to the end of our time, and my dear friend NK will give a vote of thanks. I just wanted to say how much we appreciate the opportunity for the High Commission and for LSE, thank you, Vikram, to jointly host this meeting, and to thank you for your inspirational, thoughtful comments. I think we all know that the future of the Indian economy is in good hands, and that's very good for the world. Thank you, NK.
Well, thank you very much. I think that we have had a very, very productive, interactive session. The Finance Minister's time is very precious. She has been very generous in being very tolerant to many of our questions and giving answers which are very comprehensive. My gratitude to the Indian High Commissioner, to the High Commission for having arranged and allowed the opportunity to the London School of Economics for being able to have Finance Minister for this interactive session. I was somewhat surprised when she did say at the beginning that in her current term in office, this is perhaps the first time that she is coming to United Kingdom, or what a lost United Kingdom has had, where, if I may say so with no pejorative connotation, both High Commissioners of United Kingdom to India and the other way around were not able to really incentivize the Finance Minister adequately. But certainly this marks and augurs a very good beginning. Thank you very much for having spared your time and having shared your thoughts with us. Thank you very much.
A huge thanks to our distinguished speakers today for their thoughtful and their compelling insights. Professor Larry Kramer has left, but a huge thanks to him. And of course, Sri N.K. Singh, and the brilliant moderation and his own remarks by Lord Stern, and of course, the Honorable Minister for Finance and Corporate Affairs. Your insights have not only deepened our own understanding today, but also sparked important reflections on the critical path ahead. And of course, to our wonderful audience today, thank you for your attention and your engagement. And on that note, we now invite you to join us for a lunch at Nehru Hall just across the gallery. We hope the discussions will continue informally over a meal. Thank you so much.